Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of From Page to Stage. Today, I have the joy and delight of interviewing a gorgeous lady called Christy Holt. But backtrack on that for a second. I get the joy and pleasure as me, Wendy Corner, taking you on a journey from page to stage, because all the authors I get to interview on my stage are ones who have either done the author bit or done the speaker bit to start with, crossed over, come back, or maybe they're at the author only and we're working towards the stage, the speaker bit. So that's the basis of this podcast. And now let's get on with it. The gorgeous Christy Holt awaits. Hello, Christy. How are you, love?
I am fantastic, and I love this idea. I love the idea of creating a stage to allow people a platform to get their feet wet, because authors often have so much to say, and it's only natural that they would want to find a stage to share it on.
And some of them are really nervous.
Yeah.
Particularly if it's the first time they've written. So then, Christy, what prompted you to start writing? I mean, how far back are we going in your writing?
I'm going to say about age 12, if I'm really honest.
Love it.
I loved writing when I was younger, and I don't know if any of your listeners are going to remember the Sleepover Friends or the Babysitters Club series, but I was heavily inspired by those series. I collected every book. And when I had time, and when we first got our first computer, I started writing my own similar style of books. I actually have them in a box somewhere. I don't dare take them out and read them. I might someday. I'm not brave enough yet. But that's where I kind of got my start in writing. And I've always really enjoyed writing. So it was really something that I knew actually through my adult life. I had this knowing that someday I'm going to write a book. I didn't know multiple books. That's a fun surprise, but, and I didn't know what it was going to be about. I just knew someday I'm going to write a book. And so, eventually the ideas started to drop in, and now I have lots of ideas. So just getting started.
Stop you, huh?
Exactly.
Stop me now. Okay. So Christy, your first book, your first published work, tell us a bit about that, because that was in 2022.
Yep. So I published my first book called Unstuck for Women, which essentially came out of my own personal experience, because not that long ago, I'm looking at we're in 2024 now. Looking back to about 2017, I was in a relationship that really wasn't working for me, and I felt super stuck. And I'm going to go ahead and define what I mean by feeling stuck, just so that the listeners know, well, what does that even mean? And essentially, when I was feeling stuck, it was a combination of overwhelm, anxiety, overthinking, feeling this sort of not good enoughness. It had to do with my self-worth, and it had to do with my challenges in my relationship at the time, or at least so I thought, because ultimately we're going to get round to this, but everything comes back to the relationship that we have with ourselves first and foremost. But at the time, I definitely thought that it had a lot more to do with my external circumstances than I can see now. Nonetheless, when I was stuck, I had all of these overwhelming thoughts all the time, and I didn't quite know how to get out of it. And I say in my book, and on many times when I'm speaking about it, I share about how I was suffering from what I call just a momitis, which was sort of a loss of personal identity. I was sort of wrapped into the labels of wife and mother, and I kind of forgot who I am.
Yes.
Yeah. And so I went through this time of feeling stuck. And if you're stuck, you'll notice that you're feeling stuck because there's like a tension, right? You are where you are. You might be in your quote unquote comfort zone, not sure about how to change, but you feel like there's something more, right? There's something calling you. And that's why it creates this tension. And so when I was there, I'll tell you what, I was doing an awful lot of complaining and blaming, waiting for circumstances to change, all of these things, until one day I realized I'm the common denominator in all of my problems. Imagine.
It's a horrible realization, isn't it, on the one hand, and yet so empowering on the other.
Exactly.
It's down to me to do something
Yeah.
about it. Yeah.
Right. And I have a similar sort of viewpoint on like other people don't care about you as much as you think they do. So like they don't care, and not in the bad way, but they don't care. So it's a good thing, right? So it's kind of like that two-sided thing. So yeah, absolutely. I realized if I'm the common denominator in the problems, I'm also the common factor in the solutions. So I set about doing some things to change my life. And well, here we are. And a couple of years later, now I'm in an extremely happy relationship. We're almost at 6 years together. It's absolutely phenomenal. He's my best friend, my biggest cheerleader. And honestly, we still can't keep our hands off each other. So little fun inside thing, but we really cultivated the relationship that we both desired. And that came from getting unstuck, getting really clear on what it was that I wanted to consciously create for myself, and being the person who is creating that, right? Being the person who shows up and has that. So I knew what the intentions were that I wanted moving forward. And I went out and did it. Right. I mean, that's oversimplifying. Obviously, I know if you're feeling stuck, that's a long ways off. So what I wanted to do is really take it back to that first bit and figure out how I got unstuck so that I could share that. And what I came up with was what I call the spiral stopper method. It's essentially,
hang on, say that again slowly. The spiral
stopper method.
The
spiral stopper method. So it's about stopping those emotional and thought spirals that are really causing the overwhelm.
Okay.
And essentially, I noticed that because I realized when I feel overwhelmed, if I sat back and observed that feeling of overwhelm, first of all, it would pass. It would go past with ease, as long as I didn't hang on to it. And when I started to observe it in that way, I realized that what was causing it was my own thoughts.
Yeah.
Another aha moment. And so what I wanted to create was a resource for people so that they could get into that observer role, right? And this involves moving through your survival mode, reactive sort of space and into a conscious creation space so that you can observe from a neutral standpoint. And so that is what the spiral stopper method is about. It's about building a toolbox of resources to help move you through survival onto the other side of consciously, intentionally doing the things that you really want to do.
And thriving.
Absolutely. Because every conscious choice leads to you creating the life that you really want. And you deserve to have your dreams come true and the life that you truly desire, the relationships that make you feel really good inside. And your intended state is truly one of peace, love, and happiness. And so, ultimately it's a process of getting to that space. And it's not as complicated as one might think, because you don't have to chase anything outside of yourself in order to create this state of being. It all comes from within. Yeah. And so ultimately, so much relationship with yourself, being the foundation to everything that you're experiencing in the world around you.
Is that the thing that you talk about, your unlearning as you're mentoring women? And it is primarily women that you work with?
I do work mostly with women.
Okay.
I'm not opposed to working with men. I do have some men that love my podcast and interact with me on a regular basis. But the majority of my courses, I really speak to women for women. I believe that women, we deserve our voices to be heard, and we just connect on a different level, right? So humans and humans, but I do speak largely to women. And if it resonates with people of other genders, that's a-okay too.
Yeah. The point I was making, so when you're mentoring women, you talk about unlearning.
Yes.
Is that your process of, well, I'm not going to put words in your mouth. What's about the unlearning? What's that about?
Well, essentially, like I say, our intended state, our natural state, our, basic state of being is one of happiness, peace, and love. And what happens that gets in the way of us recognizing this or experiencing this is a whole bunch of conditioning beliefs, stories, judgments, mindsets,
Mm-hmm.
all of this stuff gets piled on top. And it's not that we have to go out and create, and I know I call it create your happy, but that's more of an internal creation as opposed to a seeking in the world. But if we can stop the seeking, we stop the distraction, because essentially all of that seeking and trying outside of ourselves is just really barking up the wrong tree. You're not going to get the lasting results that we're looking for. And what will happen instead is that we will end up creating pain or suffering, because everything outside of us is temporary and fleeting. So if we're, basing our so-called happiness, like many people do, they believe that happiness is something that they experience when things go right,
Mm-hmm.
or when they have a certain thing, or,
Mm-hmm.
when things are in alignment for them. And it's something that they have for a moment, and then it goes away when that thing passes, because things are
You're
temporary.
looking for the next fix.
Looking for the next fix, an
Hello,
endless change.
addiction. Yeah.
Right. And so it's really chasing an illusion, because it's this state of happiness is not out there. It's actually within.
Yeah.
And so what is getting in the way is these illusions, these distractions, these limiting beliefs, habits that are not helpful for us, mindsets that are holding us back. And so if we can start to strip away these illusions, these unhelpful patterns and habits, and this pain and suffering that we have essentially, it's not our fault. So don't get me wrong. I'm not saying, went out and did it on purpose, but we have knowingly and unknowingly taken this on. Some of it's we were aware of, and some of it's stuff we're not aware of. And so it's really just a matter of taking a really deep look inside to see what have I been believing? Where did this belief come from? Really questioning it. And I do this through my CREATE methodology, which is a 6-step process, which is an acronym, because who doesn't love an acronym? CREATE. It's not linear, right? It's nothing in this life is like step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I mean, sure, someone out there probably proved me wrong. There's probably something that is, but this is not, as most things in life are not. It's a piecing it together, really, and meeting people where they are at. So the very quick high level, CREATE stands for calibrate your consciousness. This is those beliefs and mindsets. Refine your routine. This is looking at the way that you're structuring things. Elevate your energy. This is going to be looking at your body, your fueling, your movement. These things also affect your energy. It is activate your aligned life. This is about getting clarity about what is correct for you, so that you can act in accordance with the outcomes that you wish to create. T is for tune into your true vision. This is starting to allow yourself to dream a little bit bigger, because often when we're stuck, we don't allow ourselves the space to really dream into those big things. And so tuning into your true vision is really just allowing yourself to open up to more possibility and more opportunity.
Out of that stuck, just a stay-at-home mum.
Yeah. Right? Getting way bigger, right? Is that writing your first book? Is it starting a podcast? Is it speaking on actual stages in front of people? One of my goals is to host retreats in person eventually and around the world, because I'm a big fan of travel. And I'll just wrap up the CREATE method with the last one, which is empower your elevated self. Really, this is about the embodiment piece. This is taking the wisdom from your experiences and learnings and really moving forward in a way that allows you to have improved discernment and walk out the life in the state of being that you truly desire. And that is one of love, right? That is essentially your core state, and this energy that allows you to be is really a state of love. And so this CREATE method altogether, like I say, it's not linear. I'm going to jump back and forth from one piece to another, right? And depending on where you're starting, some needs are going to be more important than others. And then you're going to circle back, and then you're going to tie this in, and you're going to discover a new belief that needs a little bit of work, right? So it's a whole ass human process that really takes each part and really looks at what needs work in the now moment, because truly that's all we have is this now moment. And the more present we can get, the more powerful we can be as far as creating our life with conscious intention.
Love it. Love it. So that's the unlearning of all the stuff that, and being more and more conscious of those, what I call internal scripts, the stories we tell ourselves. And absolutely, they may not be consciously available to you right now. But from my experience, the more you do have the courage to look inside, the more these start to percolate to the surface. I mean, I can
an onion.
relate.
You're an onion. There's always another layer.
Yeah, because the my experience, my earliest memory was when I was 2, and that didn't actually come back to me until gone 50 years later.
Yeah,
when I was working with a skilled coach. But that abandonment experience I went through as a 2-year-old meant that I gave myself this little story. My voice doesn't matter. Everybody else's does, but mine doesn't. And that little 2-year-old's decision colored so many life choices later on. And it's only, as you say, with that observer, that take that step back and maybe even look back, that you discover where those mindset, the scripts, those internal scripts have come from. And then you can go, is that working for me now? No.
And often they came out of a trauma response, just like your abandonment wound, right? And so we actually, our mind has a bias to not bring those to our attention. Right? Which is the tricky part, because then they keep playing out in our experience and we keep wondering, oh my gosh, why am I reliving this pattern over and over? Now, the beautiful thing is, if you start to notice that there's a pattern, you are one step ahead already, because now you are aware of what is playing out, which allows you the opportunity to now get curious and figure out, well, where did that come from? And is that serving me? And yes, it probably served you at some point. All of these trauma responses that we adopt come out of a need to create our own safety. And there's, there is a strong need for that for us throughout life, but it's not always the same mechanisms that actually create safety for us, right? Our brains like to go on the past and the patterns and what's familiar. That's what our brain believes is safe. It's not always what's best for us. So we have to really be discerning. We do have to do that look back at, where did this come from, or where might this have come from? And is it really still working?
Yes. Yeah. Because obviously as a 2-year-old, that was I'm the center of my world. Of course, developmentally, that was appropriate. And
you wouldn't have known how to respond to that situation. If you think about a small child, and I've done very similar work myself, as my biological father left my mom and I when I was, I think before age 1. So I would have had no real cognitive understanding, right? And even at 2, like, the cognitive understanding at that developmental stage would be very, very minimal. And so what likely was observed is, I've been abandoned. Something about me wasn't worthy of their staying, right? Which doesn't necessarily make sense at all. And I truly do believe that everyone out there is doing the best they can with the resources and understanding that they have. But we can't think of that when we're an infant. We can't even see a perspective outside of our own experience at that age. And so we can't have compassion for, the struggles that led to those decisions. We can't even have the big picture or all of the information. All we know is our experience of it. And if we can't vocalize any of that, there is very little chance that we are actually processing that trauma in a healthy, productive way. So we take it forward.
I did have language at the time, because I was 2, nearly 3. And you can imagine I was a precocious little madam. But the point is that for you were pre-1. You did not have the language available to you to then express it verbally. And as you said, to process it. So those traumatic experiences can play out in different ways. I mean, it was a really helpful script in that I became a very successful, a very productive speech pathologist for almost 30 years, because I wanted to make sure that nobody else went through that same trauma. Not that I was even aware that there was a trauma there.
Right.
So there are pluses and minuses to seeing that pattern. It was only when it was a case of, hang on, everybody's voice matters.
Yeah.
That was the flipping that was required. And when I'm working with authors, very often they tell me, I'm an author, I'm not a speaker. Is it an either or? Can't it be a both and?
Yeah,
And
I'm a big believer in both and. So I am with you. I think if you got something to say, you got something to say.
And it's so much more powerful. Yes, it's important to get it written down. And then when an audience hears you actually speaking, your voice, as they're reading it, they've got your voice in their head. And that is so powerful. So powerful. Mm.
And there's so much, energy and vibration that's communicated through your voice that just isn't transmitted in quite the same way with the word on the paper. And the intonation, right? And the expression, the dynamics, if you will. I am a piano teacher. All of these things play into how engaging and interesting a person is when they're speaking. And you may not always, hear that when you're reading the book, because you'll be reading it in your intonation and your assumption of how they would be speaking.
Yeah.
And, when I wrote my book, I wrote it very conversationally because I wanted it to feel like I'm having a conversation with my friend. And so that is a lot about, the feedback that I received from several people who do know me well, was like, this is like sitting down and having a cup of coffee and a conversation with you. And I was like, yes, exactly what I was hoping for.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think that's for some of us who are a little older in the tooth and had formal writing taught to us at school.
Yeah.
The modern way of writing in that conversational style takes a little getting used to.
Yeah.
But once you do it, and then let's face it, if you're on socials and authors, if you're not on socials, come on.
On the
Get your
socials.
message out there. You've got to get
Yeah.
your message out there. And it's about leaving your legacy, because the book will only go into so many hands.
Yeah.
But if you are appearing on camera, you're appearing in somebody's ears, then that message continues. And as you say, it's that energy, it's that vibrancy that is carried in your voice as you speak.
And I think that's how you can really assess someone's level of authenticity and embodiment from it, which actually gives so much more weight to the words as well. Because if anybody can say words and anybody can have a really good editor edit the words. But if you hear someone speaking from their experience, telling their story, you're going to be able to sense, the real energy behind it. And that's beyond powerful. And so if you're doing that and you're writing and you're telling your story, your listeners and your readers, they're going to just take that up a notch as far as the benefit that they're going to get when they hear you speaking it, and really connect all of that embodiment to like, wow, yeah, no, she really, is passionate about this, and she really understands what she's sharing and the lessons that were learned during this. It's just so much more powerful that way. And take that to your social media, because how are you going to reach so many people without it?
Exactly. I mean, it's pretty much modern day free advertising.
Yeah.
Okay, the algorithm is a little dodgy and it changes with the wind, and it seems that nobody can predict it. But the point is, if you are consistent and persistent, then people get to know you. And you were saying about the credibility, the authenticity.
Yeah.
We all like to buy, but we don't like to be sold to.
Yes.
We like to have the person behind the brand, that connection with them. There's some affinity there.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, all the big brands, you think of Virgin, immediately you think of Richard Branson. You think of Apple, immediately you go to Steve Jobs, even although he's no longer with us. The point is, there are personas behind a brand. And when you get to know that brand, hello, I really want to know more about you. Tell me more. It's then a warm lead if you're going into a business perspective.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. So for you, your writing started around well, your published writing started around 2022. When did your speaking start?
Well, I have been speaking, I started as a health coach. I began into this foray into the online coaching and mentoring space, oh gosh, 9 or 10 years ago now, as a personal trainer and nutrition coach. Heavy on the mindset though, because I have an extreme distaste for diet culture. And so I have never been one to really get behind, here's what you have to do, just go do it. It's always been for me, but like what feels really good for you? Because listen, if you're not going to feel good about it, you're not going to stick with it and you're not going to get lasting results. And we're past the time, please. Please let me be clear that I hope we are all past the time of the roller coaster quick fix diet, and that we are on to the reality that lasting change comes from making sustainable choices, right? Not this, I'm going to do this thing until I lose 20 pounds and then that was too hard and I can't stick with it. So for me, I got my start into that, but it was so much about the mindset of like, let's start by feeling good, right? What kind of things feel good in your body? Let's get you to a place where you can visualize how good you could feel and start acting from that aligned space. And so as I sort of evolved and grew and I got just more and more tired of diet culture, I shifted away and more into the mindset coaching as a general path over to where I'm kind of settled now, which is relationship. But between you and me, ultimately, it's about self-mastery because everything comes back to the relationship we have with ourselves. There's literally no human experience that is just purely out there. Everything is filtered through our own perceptions, our own mindsets, our beliefs, and our own lens. And so that's where we can actually take the reins and make a shift, step in our power to really create and affect the change that we want to see. So if you're looking to create change, you ultimately need to be the change, right? And this is the powerful thing of it. And I do love speaking about relationships because I do have the most incredible partner and I know what it takes. I've done things both ways. I've done the unhappy, unhealthy, terrible situation. And I have learned so much from that I have taken that into my current relationship. And I know what it takes to create a really healthy, happy relationship. And I want to show other people because we deserve to clear away the muck. And I like to say, essentially I turned my mess into my message, which is to say the mess is still in there. I didn't forget about it. It didn't go away. I actually learned from that. And I expanded that learning into discernment and wisdom that I'd carried into this relationship, which allowed me to create exactly the relationship that I wanted. And so, it's sort of been a journey, as as it is for most of us through the way here. But I started speaking on health and fitness many years ago. I would say I really ramped it up as I went online, pretty dedicated online when the pandemic started because everything in reality shut down.
Had to.
Poof, overnight. Didn't have any of the things that I was doing. I wasn't quite sure what to do. I honestly did start writing a fiction novel, which I'll have to come back to that. I wasn't sure how it was going to end, and I think I know now, but I have a few other projects to complete first before I circle back to the novel. And so I had been speaking on a lot of these things. So I'm like really speaking online, going live on Facebook and doing things for the last 4 years. And 2 years ago, I started my podcast, which is called Create Your Happy. And this really came from a fact that when I had conversations with people, I was like, dang, like I have so much good, juicy stuff to share that comes out when I'm having a good, deep, meaningful conversation. And so I just knew, I need to start recording some of these conversations and put them out into the world, because I know that if I'm finding it valuable and my friends finding it valuable, that other people out there will also find it valuable. And I do believe that by sharing our stories and our experiences, the lessons that we've learned, may they be ugly or not, that gives other people a permission slip to step into their power, to recognize, first of all, that they're not alone, but also to take those nuggets and use them to give themselves permission to unlearn, to let go, to release what's not serving them, and to step into the, you don't, I like to just kind of say, you don't have to become someone else. Like, this isn't about a method of becoming someone else. It is actually of just a state of you being that person that you want to be. You're already that person inside. You're already whole. You have everything that you need. You're literally fully equipped, and you don't need to try or make all of this big change. You just need to start acting as that person who you wish to be. It's already within you. So that's really you stepping into your power.
So absolutely, thank you. So from my perspective of what I've just heard you say, the diet stuff and the getting unstuck is moving away from way of thinking. I need to lose 20 kilos. And when I've lost my 20 kilos, well, great. Now I can go back to eating as I was. No, because that's taking you right back to where you were. Whereas you're encouraging us to have a going towards mindset. This is what I want. This is where I'm going. And this is where I'm going to keep going. And the process, I'm learning. The end goal may change a bit, but boy, am I learning on the way. And it's still the same person.
Yeah, it's shifting away from problem focus and into solution focus, right? Because what we give our energy to, we create more of that. And so if we focus on our problems, well, I tell my kids this all the time, the longer you spend time focusing on the problem, what's wrong, and pointing fingers and trying to figure out who's at fault and all of these things, there is no solution coming. And oftentimes that happens because we're in survival mode. And so, it's not like it's our fault. And I really genuinely don't think people talk a lot about self-sabotage. I recently did an episode of my podcast about self-sabotage. I don't believe anyone out there is intentionally trying to mess things up for themselves. It is about safety. It is about self-preservation. And so if we can go in with that mindset of self-preservation instead of self-sabotage, we can empower ourselves to do things differently. We can shift the focus from the problems to the solutions that we want to create. And if we're not in survival mode, we are able to step into this conscious creation mode, which just brings more of our brain back online, because survival mode actually turns some of our brain function on I like to say on low power mode, or like power save mode. We're just focused on not dying in that mode. So if we want to bring those critical thinking skills on board so that we can really take, advantage of this incredible machine that we've got here for computing and understanding and processing, we want to shift out of survival and into conscious creation, into intentional behavior and choice. And this, sometimes we can't see when we're really stuck. We can't see always that we have a choice, but the truth is that we do always have a choice. And it's just a matter of shifting through and, feeling to heal, sort of feeling those emotions, allowing them to move through, allows us to move away from the reactions and the problem focus and into responding and intentional movement and aligned action, basically from that place, which allows us to come up with way better solutions.
Well, this is the thing with the authors and the speakers. So bringing this back to the speaking bit, guys, we're looking at what is it you're telling yourself, understanding that this is self-preservation. You don't want to stick your head above the parapet in case somebody lops it off. We have tall poppy syndrome in Australia. That's a well-known syndrome. But the point is, if you can realize that it's not going to kill you, in fact, it's actually going to really help you. Yes, there will be baby steps required. Will you be totally fluent on your first meeting out? No. What? Who cares? I can share with you now. I hope you don't mind, Christy. Christy shared a memory of a video that she posted a few years ago when she was in her seriously stuck moment. And oh, my heart went out to her, because I thought, that is not the woman I know now. And it's really when you see that contrast of what you have been and what you become or grow into, because you are already there. My point is, don't label yourself as either or. You require to be both, And as we've said, that self-preservation of I'm going to die. No, you're not. Let's take the baby steps. And that's where a podcast comes in. And you've got two podcasters here having a good old chat with you. So this is where we start off. Your first stage can be a podcast. Now, Christy, your podcast, Create Your Happy, you do a combination, because you do seasons, don't you? Specific seasons.
Yes. And I'm currently doing a solo season right now, which is super fun because I'm writing my next book, which is going to be about getting unstuck when it comes to relationships.
Okay.
And again, big spoiler alert, it is going to come back to that relationship with self, because again, everything happens from within you. All of your experiences are created from that space. But I am writing this next book. It is well underway. And I just thought, what better way to enhance my book writing than to speak about all of the topics that I'm also writing into the book. So I'm doing this simultaneously. I've written a pretty good first draft, but I want to dive a little bit deeper into the different topics. I want to flesh it out. So essentially, I'm writing another talk on individual subjects within it, delivering this talk, really putting together all of the information that I want to convey around these individual topics that come together to make this book, and then taking my talk and taking it back to the book and making sure that I'm really covering my bases. And, it will end up sounding like me because I'm writing as I'm speaking and speaking as I'm writing and writing and tying it all back together. And as well, not only that, but it's, I think, a great marketing lead up to the release of the book to be speaking about these individual topics, garnering an audience who is really interested in improving their relationships or creating healthy relationships. And so it was kind of a two birds with one stone, if you will, to do these two things simultaneously. And yeah, I'm just really excited. I did a weird thing. So I'm going to loosely just say, and people probably wonder what the heck I'm talking about. I did 2.5 seasons, called it a half season because I wasn't sure where it was going. I have about 80 episodes prior to this current season, and I had guests on for all of those. I truly believe that women's voices need to be raised and they need to be heard around the world. I truly believe that by sharing our story, we can give others permission. We can make them feel like they're not alone. We can offer solutions and wisdom. And I am someone who suggests that you don't have to take it all. Just try it on and see what fits, and take what fits and wear it around for a while and see what happens. And if it doesn't fit, take it off. It's okay. Nothing that I share is like the only truth, because the fact of the matter is you have your only truth. You're the only one that has your truth. You're the only one in your body. You're the only one who knows what's aligned and correct for you. There truly is no right and wrong or good or bad. That's all an illusion, a fabrication. So let yourself off the hook and just start exploring what feels really, really good for you. And that's where you're going to start to discover, the truth within you. There's no one out there has all the right answers. That's an illusion. There's no such thing as perfection, another illusion. We've been after so many illusions that we forget the truth that comes right back to us, and that we have our truth. We have our answers. We know what's correct for us. And if we can just learn to sit with that instead of chasing the next thing and the next strategy and the next, we should all over ourselves a lot. If we can just be ourselves and then take aligned action from that place, this is how we can stay in the present moment, in our power, and acting in the way that actually creates the life we want. So yeah, that's where the magic happens.
Beautiful. So we've got a podcast here. So you've got your own stage. Yay. Yeah. Are you speaking on other stages as well? Virtual summits, live stages, in-person stages?
Yeah, I have done a number of summits. I actually have an event coming up. I'm not sure when this episode is going to air with you and I, but I have a virtual event coming up in a couple of weeks. I'm really excited to speak at that. That is about relationships. And
okay, well, give us the details, give us the links, and all the interviews that I do with people, I ask them, is there a time sensitivity here? Is there something that you want this to go out before so that people can link in with you? So I know that you've just had a book out last month before, February.
Yes. I did have a recent book out. It is called Run for Your Life.
There it
It
is on
is
your gorgeous
a
bookshelf.
yes, on my little collection here. I even have my sweary coloring book here behind me, which is just a fun little side project. And the Run for Your Life project, ultimately, I teamed up with another local publisher here. I'm in Canada, in Alberta, and my friend Larissa and I had a conversation, and we realized that we had both been runners. Neither of us were running at the time that we had the conversation, but we shared this common history. And I actually, in fact, met my current partner while running a marathon. So this is how this conversation came to this turn, and realized we're both runners, and we both being runners knew that runners love to share their stories. They love to talk. They love to talk about running. But while the book is about running, it's also not about running, because running is a great metaphor for how we approach life. And
Hmm.
so I knew I had a story to share about my partner and I meeting. And truth be told, it started way before that. That's really honestly the end of my story in my chapter. It started when I began running away from my marriage, or at least I thought I was running away from my marriage, until I realized I was running away from myself. So you'll have to grab the book and read the chapter to find out all of the in-between parts of that story. But it is a collaborative book. There are 14 chapters, 14 incredible authors. It is it is a book that will bring tears to your eyes, a chuckle to your gut, and inspire you to lace up your running shoes and get outside, because it is far more than about just the miles. It is about the life lessons. And that is, in fact, the subtitle of the book, Life Lessons Learned, or Lessons Learned from Going the Distance. And it is about how we as runners, but also just humans,
Hmm.
explore life, and how we, take the lessons learned from long distance running and how they apply to many other areas of life. And so that came out March 15th. We have done 2 in-person launch events for that. So that has been absolutely phenomenal. So I guess I have done a little bit of public speaking, because I did speak at both of those launch events,
Oh,
sharing
but you
little
see,
tidbits from my
that's the
story.
point. For
Yeah.
me, public speaking is every time you open your mouth when you speak to somebody else. You're speaking
Yeah.
in a public, you have an audience.
Yeah.
And actually,
Actually, just temporarily forgot.
yeah, I mean, no, I'm making that point not to pick you up, but I'm making that
Yeah.
point that
You're right.
we generally think of stages as being, sort of big things that you stand on top of with a microphone and people are in front of you and you spout forth. And a lot of people immediately think of Tony Robbins, rah, rah, rah.
Yeah. In a
Ooh.
stadium with 20,000 people. We can start smaller than that. I believe we had about 100 people at our first launch event, which was actually a really great turnout.
Mm.
And the second event was capped at 50 people. That was just due to the space it was in.
Sure.
But yeah, I mean, for me, that feels a little old hat, because I've been doing this podcast and speaking in summits and events and doing all of these things for quite some time. Before that, I had experience public speaking as a fitness instructor. I
Yes.
actually also taught university level accounting way back in the day. I used to be a professional accountant. And so I have had these
Mm.
different opportunities to do public speaking, teaching, there maybe not the traditional way, but for me, it wasn't super scary to start going live on Facebook. That felt very, well, okay, I can't, I'll be honest. It was uncomfortable for like the first couple of times, just because it was new and the technology was different. And, you kind of get in your head a little bit about, is anybody watching, and all of these little tidbits.
Mm.
But if you just keep showing up and doing the thing, listen, all new things feel challenging and difficult, right? Anything
Exactly.
new, any new routines, any new habits, they're going to feel a bit uncomfortable at first. And so the way past that is just to keep doing the damn thing
Mm.
until it feels easy.
Well,
And so that's what I've done.
I don't talk about comfort zones. I talk about familiar zones,
Yeah.
because sometimes our quotes comfort zone is
Right. Not
not
comfortable at all.
comfortable at all.
Mm-mm.
But it's a case of better the devil you know than the
Yeah,
devil you don't. And
exactly.
so, like you, I mean, I stuck with a relationship for 20 years. My husband was mentally unwell, and a lot of people were saying, "Get out."
Yeah.
It was familiar.
Scary.
It
It can be
was
so
not
scary.
comfortable, but
Yeah.
it was familiar
Yeah.
until the decision was taken out of my hands and he passed away.
Mm.
That's another matter entirely. And in fact,
Yeah.
that was the subject of the first chapter that I wrote last year. And
Mhm.
like you, we had a book launch, and there were 6 of us based in Perth, because I was in
Yeah.
Perth, Australia at the time. And we had readings. So I offered, because as you've mentioned already, there's teaching, there's facilitating, there's keynoting, there's podcasting. There are lots of different styles of speaking. So I offered the girls the opportunity for a coaching session with me as to how to read from stage. And we had a Facebook thread together. And before I got home from the first one, because I'd actually gone to meet this lady in person, she started reading from the book, and I went, "Can I stop you?" I modeled it for her. She repeated back, and she went, "I can feel the energy rising." I said, "Yes, and I can see it too." It was so different for her. And every one of those girls made a phenomenal change after one session, because as one of them said, "I've been wended." I love that.
Magic.
So exactly, the point is that you do have different skill sets required for different forms of speaking.
Yeah.
Your podcasting, your virtual, your live stages, they're all stages.
Yeah.
And those authors who are a little reluctant, I trust that we've brought you along the journey here to see the importance of even that one-on-one conversation in a podcast. Yeah. So as we're winding up, Christy, are there any nuggets, juicy nuggets you can share with our audience as to how you embody, how you take your written words and bring them to life on whatever stage you happen to be on at the time?
I think that the biggest thing for me is truly just speaking from the heart and sharing my own experiences. And, I was actually reflecting on this earlier in a conversation today about a post that I had seen, which essentially said, if you are authentic in your sharing, there are no images to maintain. And this to me is a real sense of freedom. I don't have to remember anything, which is great because actually my memory, not that great, to be honest. And so none of what I'm sharing has to come from a memorization or anything like that. It is just literally me speaking from my own experience, from my heart. And the more that we get comfortable just speaking and sharing from our heart in that way, the easier it becomes. There is nothing to, create this massive structure and perfection around. You just allow the words to come through you because it's just your truth in that moment. And that being authentic is what allows you to live in a way that's very free. Because like I said, there's no image to maintain. There's nothing to keep up with. There's no standard of perfection to meet. It's just you being you, and you are magic. So, leaning into that magic that you are is one of your superpowers.
Thank you. Because I know that, again, when the authors start off on this speaking journey, and I need to be word perfect. I need to remember everything. No ums, ahs, and ers. Okay. No conversation. Are you seriously telling me that in a conversation there are no ums, ahs, and ers? I think you'll find there are. It's that. I mean, I'm also a TEDx trainer, and when the TEDx team get very upset on the first session when I say, know your script, absolutely, know the contents, and then go off piste on the day. They go, oh, we fact checked. Yeah, keep to the facts. Don't introduce any more facts, otherwise these guys are going to have a heart attack. But the point is, know it so well that should you miss a cue, if you've learned it, you use a different part of your brain. And if you miss a line, you miss your cue, it throws you for the rest of it. Whereas if you know your material because it's your story, okay, nobody else knows if I missed a bit and need to go back to it.
And you really can't mess it up, right? Yeah. And that's the magic behind it. If it's your story, and that's another thing too that I think a lot of people really worry about, is they have fear behind sharing their story, as it might upset someone or someone might not like it. But no one can really argue with you if you're sharing authentically from your heart. And if someone else doesn't like that, well, that's really more a reflection of where they're at, not your story. Your experience is your experience, and no one can take that away from you.
Yes, exactly. I mean, on that point, I didn't share the abandonment story until my mother passed. because I didn't want it to look bad on her.
Yeah.
But to fill in the dots, she couldn't come for me because this was a hospital experience. And back in the 60s, parents weren't allowed to stay in hospital with their children. And I can imagine that she was a total wreck on the other side.
Yeah. Yeah, but how would you know that from the
Not as a
child's
2-year-old.
perspective? There's no possible way for you to have known that.
Yeah. And as a 2-year-old, that wouldn't even have figured because I am the
No.
center of my world. Back to that point we were saying about the filters and what those internal scripts served us at the time that we created them.
Yeah. And we can uncreate them just the
Yes,
same.
Exactly. We can flip that script, make it something much more resourceful in the direction that we are going.
Absolutely. Direction of happiness, because that's your intended state. So why not aim for the things that you truly want to create? Because your energy going towards it is what is going to help fuel that expansion, and stepping into those experiences from that place will feel much easier. And, it'll just be a simpler process for you.
It's actually far less energy involved when you're you and not trying to cover up all the things that, as you said, remembering. Now, who did I tell this to?
Yeah.
Who have I got to be in this situation? You.
Honestly, I'm a terrible liar for that reason. I would never be able to keep track of it. So everyone out there just going to know that I am 100% factual, because I wouldn't be able to keep it straight. So
real and raw.
You get what you get.
Yes, exactly.
Yes, real and raw, real over perfect every single day of the week.
Yes. And that's the thing, because when people listen to you, if you're seen as some guru up here, you're unattainable.
Right.
And not relatable. Whereas if you're maybe 2 or 3 steps ahead of me, she's been.
Now that's inspiration, right? Not some impossible future goal that's causing me to, suffer from comparisonitis or imposter syndrome. Now I think maybe I could do that too, right? And that's how we can inspire other people to follow in the path. That's how leaders really truly work. They don't work from a pedestal. They work from the ground level. Like I like to say, I like to link arms with my clients. I don't have your answers. You do. But let's work together so you can discover them for yourself.
And then it's far more meaningful, because again, it's back to the internal stuff. It's me who's discovered this. Yes, I might have been given some help on the way, but it's not somebody telling me what to do.
Right.
It's me working it out for myself. And that's when it sticks.
Yep. The rest of it, kind of a waste of time, honestly. And I can say that because I have done that, been there, done that, got the t-shirt. And it's just far more powerful when you start looking within instead of looking without, because again, it's an illusion. You're wasting your time looking out there. The only true source is within you.
Oh, Christy, thank you so much for sharing. As we're winding up, is there anything we've missed off?
Oh no, I think we've covered most of it. I hope that this inspires people to go out there and, speak authentically, whether that be on a small stage or even just in front of a couple of friends, even to start with. It's all okay. There's nothing wrong. And the more you do it, the easier it will get. So don't let your first, nerve-wracked experiences hold you back. Keep going. It will get easier, one baby step at a time.
Exactly. Thank you. Thank you so much, Christy. So you've got this event coming up. We're going to make sure that that information is in the show notes, and we will have yours out before then. Thank you so much for sharing with us your page to stage.
Thank you so much for having me.
Bye from us.